Today on Accelerating Excellence, we have Ben Askren. Ben is a legend in the world of combat sports, a two-time NCAA Division I wrestling champion, an undefeated 87-match streak holder. Ben redefined dominance on the mat before conquering the MMA world as a Bellator and ONE welterweight champion. Known as Funky for his unorthodox style, he's one of the most decorated grapplers in history with an unforgettable run in the UFC. Ben has scrapped with some of the toughest guys on the planet: Jorge Masvidal, Robbie Lawler, Lima, and of course, he famously boxed YouTuber Jake Paul. Whether he's slamming opponents or dropping knowledge as an analyst, coach, and author, Ben takes risks, finds a way to win, and profits from the obstacles he encounters. He's authored multiple books, including Funky, My Defiant Path Through Wrestling, MMA, and Life, and most significantly, and most recently, co-authored Extreme Balance with our mutual friend, Spartan founder and former guest, Joe De Sena, and psychologist David Sachs. And this is where Ben and I click, our shared obsession with mindset. He's been studying it for as long as he can remember. In this episode, we discuss the mindset of a combat athlete, nurturing talent, perfectionism, cowboys, and what Ben means by extreme balance, and how it's a non-negotiable for reaching the pinnacle in any craft. I hope you enjoy. Ben Askren, welcome to Accelerating Excellence. How you doing, mate?
I'm doing great, having a good day. Got some things done already this morning, so life's good.
Winning the day, love to hear it. Can you kick off by just explaining to those listening where it all began for you?
Yeah, of course. It all began. That's such a big question when you frame it like that. I was I don't want to say average. I was just a normal kid. I played a lot of sports. My parents got me into it. I was the way I tell my wrestling story is at age 11, I decided to get more serious about wrestling and I quit baseball. I really had liked wrestling.
I kind of interest.
Yeah. What's up?
What prompted that to?
I think the biggest thing was probably I felt let down by team sports because in team sports you're so reliant on other people for your success, and I struggled with that. If they didn't want to work as hard or put in the right amount of effort, I really struggled with that concept. So age 11, I quit baseball and I did more wrestling, and of course because I did more, I got better. And then at age, it was either 14 or 15. I was a ninth grader. I played football, and then I said, "That's it. I'm going all in on wrestling." And this is a time period where nobody goes all in on wrestling. There was no clubs that were year round, so I got a little mat in my basement, and I had to find people to wrestle with, and kind of put my own training program together essentially because it didn't really exist in the frame that I wanted to do it. Yeah. So then from there, I kind of, it still took a few years, but I started getting a lot better. And then, a couple of years later, I would get recruited to the University of Missouri. And then I had a great college career. And then I went to the Olympics. And then I decided to fight. And I did pretty well at that. During my fighting career, my brother and I started Askren Wrestling Academy, and now which we have 7 locations, which there's no one else who does that in wrestling. And I don't know if we're de facto the #1 wrestling organization in America because they don't really have a championship for that specifically, but I think you could make a good argument for it.
Absolutely. It's incredible what you've achieved in the sport, in the space. But bring it back to I guess you growing up. I know obviously from reading the book, sounds like you've also had this interest in psychology, full stop, right? I remember in the book you talk about how your dad sort of saying to you when you were young, it's all mental.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like that is something that's a real part of you as well as being the wrestling itself.
Yeah. I wish I could flip. You know what? I always feel like I should be able to. I have some connections on my computer, so I can't flip it around. But I have this very large library of books. I buy the physical copy of every book I read, and generally I save them because you never know when you're going to need to reference them. And obviously, there's some books that I've never touched, but there's some of these that I'd go back and read through or try to find something many times. And if not, honestly, it's kind of good just to see them and think, oh yeah, I remember what that book was about. But my first real huge interest, and so I think this was a little bit happenstance how I started to what I would say think correctly or think the most effectively, is I loved reading about great athletes. Didn't matter the sport. I would get probably football and baseball started it because that was what I enjoyed the most as a kid. But I mean, You pick a sport. I probably read about some elite athletes, whether it's tennis or swimming or track and field or long distance running, mountaineering. Well, pick a random field, and I've likely read about the most elite athletes in that field. And so from a young age, that was always my preoccupation. And so I think by just reading about all these people over the course of years, I got a pretty good framework on how they thought about things or what the most effective way to think about things was. Um, and so my thought was that if I could make myself think correctly, that, I would be as effective as possible. And that's still a thought process we hold true at Askren Wrestling Academy. We talk a lot about the way kids think and how to
Mm.
do it the most effectively. Because it's really important. If you can get that right in the beginning, it's going to make everything else way easier. And honestly, I would say most of the time with younger athletes, and honestly, I'll probably say this about most adults and most people in the business world.
Yeah,
There is
yeah,
some mental component that they're not balanced on, right? Extreme balance, or that they're hung up on,
yeah,
that is
yeah.
prohibiting them from taking the next couple steps because they can't get over it. Maybe it's they're too stubborn, and stubbornness has some great parts, but it's got some bad parts too, right? Maybe this would be a little kid one, but maybe, oh, well, maybe not just looking. Some people can't keep their composure,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Something goes wrong and they lose their freaking mind. And, and so, right, there's all these mental components that you kind of need to be able to check that box to go to the next level.
Absolutely. And it sounds like Ali was a big influence for you as well.
Absolutely. Yep. He was one of my favorite reads. So if you looked at my bookshelf, I'd probably
Yeah.
have, I don't know, 10, 12, 14 Muhammad Ali books. He was amazing, not just obviously as a boxer. And that's some of my favorite athletes. It's not about who they were as an athlete. It's about who they were as a person. And with Ali, the amount of conviction he gave up really 3.5 years of the prime of his career.
Yeah.
So we're probably talking somewhere between 10 and 15 fights at literally the peak of his career
Mm.
because he didn't think we should be fighting in Vietnam. And at the time that was really looked down upon, but now you reflect on that from, what we're 50 years later or whatever, more than 50 years later, you think, holy shit, that was a
Yeah.
very principled stance about, against a very unjust war that
Yeah.
we shouldn't have been in. Like, holy shit, how did he have the guts to stand up for it? And, because then the thing is, you could say, well, if he just would have said, okay, I'll fight in the war, they wouldn't have really sent him to war.
Sure.
Right, they would have made him do some boxing exhibitions. They probably would have let him continue his competitive career, and they would have put him up on a pedestal of, look at this guy. But he was very
You'd have been the
principled.
poster boy for something he didn't believe in. It's incredible, isn't it, when people
Absolutely,
take that
yes,
stance?
yes. So like lots of times it was for almost who they were as a person more than an athlete.
Absolutely. And as you were going through that, you're obviously at college and you win, you have a lot of success there. And I think the college system is something that we in the UK just admire immensely.
Yeah.
We just don't have it similar. Everything's like academy sport in the UK. But like, at what
Yes.
point in time did you sort of realize I could be really good at this? Was that before college?
Um.
Was there a moment where you sort of thought, this is beyond me just being ambitious and enjoying this? Like, I can do
Yeah.
this at the highest level.
Yeah. I had a mental Monday, I don't know, a couple months ago maybe, about how a lot of these athletes that I meet, and then I can say for sure it's true of myself. Um. There is almost a delusionality about the level of success you can have. And if you just think about just from a numbers perspective, like in America, there's probably a million kids that wrestle, and
Yeah.
10 of them win a Division I NCAA title every year. And then every 4 years, seven of them go to the Olympics, six or seven, depending on what year, go to
Oh,
the
the odds are
Olympics. So it's
nuts,
like
aren't they?
the
Yeah.
odds are, it's
Yeah.
just it's a tiny little fraction, it's almost nothing. So the odds that you think, oh, I can go do that, even if you're one of the better little kids, it's like, well, that's still from a percentage basis is almost nothing.
Yeah.
And then if you're way behind a lot of people like I was, um, it probably becomes even smaller. So there is a little level of delusionality. And kind of the way I framed it the other day was, well, you have to believe you can do it. And if you believe you can do it, you're willing to put in the work for it. And it's not just a week or a month or what, it's like 10 years, 15 years, something like this. And I know I started getting serious, like I said. So 1999 was when I quit football. And then the next year I was lucky enough to convince my parents to send me to the Olympic trials to watch. And I went and
Okay.
watched and I said, holy shit, this is what I want to do. And so that was like an 8-year vision, right? So I had
Wow.
this vision in 2000, and it's like and I had to live it. It's like not like, oh, I can just think about it. Oh, that would be great. And then it's just going to happen. Right. It's like, so for 8 years, I kind of lived that vision. Um, and so I think there's definitely a level of delusionality about, how easy it's going to be. And I think, oh, I can go do that. And it's like, you realize it's a really minuscule fraction of people that are able to do it. And then you go to work and you put in many years and, some of us get there.
And you make it. So you smash it at college. You then go
Yeah.
to the Olympics, and then again you pivot, right? Because
Yeah.
of course wrestling's a huge part of MMA, but there's still more to it, right? It's still
Yeah,
another
of course.
new step. So then you go into that journey. Like how was that? Mentally, how was that journey?
Um, I enjoyed it. I honestly, for me, it was kind of easy. I was a good wrestler. I had seen some friends and some competitors who had started taking that direction. And obviously, if you reflect at that exact point in time,
Yeah,
um, there was almost nobody, right? Nobody doing that. So if you guys are not aware of MMA or the UFC, right? It started like in the early 90s, but then there was a period, especially in America, where it kind of went dark, where they tried banning. I think it was legal in only like 3 or 4 states. And then, it's I don't know, 2003 or whatever, and Dana and Lorenzo and those guys, they bought it.
yeah,
Meanwhile, you had Pride in Japan going on that was growing at kind of that same time. But so if like what you said, when I went to college, nobody was doing that as a job. It
yeah,
wasn't a thing. And then so by the end of my college career, it's like, oh, this is like an interesting thing, and there's some guys making some good money, and it kind of looks like fun. And then a few of my teammates started doing it. Tyron Woodley being the most notable.
yeah,
A few competitors or guys I compete with, and it's like, hey, let me go try that. And hey, if I could be good at it, I'll keep doing it. And if I don't like it, then I'll go back to wrestling. And I liked it, and I was relatively good at it. I won the Bellator belt within like I think 18 months of starting the sport, and then yeah, and then I kind of stuck with it. Then I retired for the first time in 2017, and then I got my opportunity to fight in the UFC because I'd kind of been blackballed, I guess you'd say, earlier. And so I unretired about 16 months later, and I fought in the UFC, and then I knew I wasn't gonna be. I didn't want to be there for long. It's one of the things from reading about all those athletes. Two main notes I made for myself were number one, everyone tries to hang on too long, right? So
yeah,
be done early because you always get worse. Time is undefeated. And number two would be everyone always spends too much money and they end up broke. And then that's,
yeah.
honestly, that's a prime
Tell you
driver
what,
of
yeah,
them
they're
having to stick around.
two pretty solid ones to note down. And
Yes.
obviously, I guess you've seen that growth as UFC surge. It's been phenomenal to watch, and it's the popularity's grown immensely in the
Yes.
UK
And
too.
then it's still growing.
Yeah, yeah, it's a force to be reckoned with. And I guess one of the things that's different that I've enjoyed watching you is
Hmm.
that and I think it's one of the things that is great about boxing and UFC is the entertainment aspect in terms of some of the trash talking and there's that
Yes.
side and the build up. It really does get exciting. How was that? Because that's obviously completely different from Olympics or college, right? Or was it to you
Um,
behind the scenes?
yeah, you know what? I was kind of an anomaly in wrestling that I had a personality, and I always, you know what? I always had fun speaking my mind and just kind of
It's a
being who I
massive part of it
was.
though, isn't it? Because it
Well,
makes
in
you
wrestling, it
humble.
wasn't. In wrestling, you're really supposed to kind of like, what's the right word for it? In wrestling, you're really supposed to be humble and not talk. And even today, it's a
Yeah.
lot like that still. Um, and I genuinely disagree with that sentiment. I think people should have personalities. So
Yeah.
I always spoke my mind, but yes, it was kind of looked down upon in wrestling. And then so, when I went over to MMA, it was kind of that's just who I was. And so it came really natural.
Yeah. And so in terms of when you look back on your career, one of the questions I love to ask is, what would you identify as perhaps a peak experience where, everything came together, you're putting out full power, accessing everything you've got in terms of all the technical ability you've spent decades honing. Was
Yeah.
there a period of time or one fight in particular where you felt like it all came together in terms of peak performance for you?
You know what? I guess the couple I had in Bellator, the last three, I just
Mm.
really smashed the guys. And I kind of got, I don't want to say a bad name, but like they said, oh, it's kind of boring, or I had a handful of decisions, but I just didn't know how to fight, right? I literally started the Bellator tournament, I think something like 10 months after I started fighting. So I didn't know what I was doing. Like,
'Cause you
I'm
took
like,
on
I
a
can,
lot of fights quite quick as well, didn't you? And like a lot,
yeah, no, yeah, no,
frequency.
yeah, it was 14 months. It was 14 months. I don't want to
Okay.
exaggerate. So it's 14 months.
Okay.
And yeah, I had 3 fights in 3 months and then the title fight like a couple months later. So I was like, I know I can wrestle the shit out of these people and punch them some and do enough to get a win.
Yeah.
But I didn't have a really complete submission game. I wasn't very good at, striking them yet. And then, so it took a while. And then it was Douglas Lima, and then I fought Carl Amasu, and then I fought Anu Kreshkov in my last 3 fights in Bellator. And I really kind of like smashed hard because I just kind of had started been putting all the skills together. And then honestly, and that was when then I tried to transition to the UFC, and Dana didn't give me an offer, unfortunately. And I went to ONE Championship, and in ONE Championships, I didn't really have any competitive fights.
Mm.
I had one Russian guy who was tough, who that was my only fight that went the distance, but I won all of the rounds. And so, those 3 ones in Bellator, and that would have been nice going off that to then fight guys who were, quote unquote, better than me or higher in the rankings. I really felt like I was clicking on all cylinders.
And in terms of like extreme balance, like
Yeah.
where where is that where has that been a strength for you in your career in terms of practicing what you preach in the book there? Like, can you
Yeah.
give me some examples that people could, transfer to their world, whether that's elite military, top level sport, different sports, or guys in trading, investing.
Yeah. I think it's always been a strength. And again, something like with, I have it right here, right, the book right in front of me. Um, I feel like, because of all of that early reading, Um, I wouldn't have called myself an expert sports psychologist, but I really think I took the correct path with myself. Like when I reflect on my competitive career, I don't feel like, oh shoot, I was doing this way wrong. I wish I would have changed over, or, I wish I would have done something differently. If I reflect on my high school career, there's a few times there where I'm like, oh, I think this was an obvious mental mistake. But kind of past that, I feel like I was making a lot of the right decisions. And, it was like towards the middle of college where I started kind of gaining this idea, the ideas that would eventually go into extreme balance. I think the first one I put together was, um, oh, let me just figure out which chapter it is. And I'll tell you what the original title was, and it's very lame compared to what's better. So it's preparing for everything and expecting the unexpected, which is our chapter 9. And in the beginning, that was the preparer and the cowboy. And what I started noticing with some of my college teammates was this: if and it was distinct personality types. There were certain guys who they didn't really train all that well, and they ate like shit, and they partied a lot, and they did these things. But when it was match time, they brought the heat. You know what I'm saying? They
Yeah.
showed up and they competed like to the utmost of their potential. And then you had these other guys, and they would do their diet correctly, and they would go to sleep on time. Everything was on point, very, very
Yeah.
well prepared, right? So I called them the preparers, and the other ones the cowboys. And when it came to match time, though, lots of times, and I didn't fully understand everything at that time, but I was making these notes in my mind that they often perform poorly. They didn't
Yeah.
perform up to what their skill level was. Like in practice, I see them in wrestling practice, and in practice, they're way better. And in a match, not so great. And then I mean, we could talk for a whole hour on this if you want,
Yeah.
but what I start realizing as I understand psychology more is that this preparer or type, and I still deal with these because there's kids who are just more naturally inclined to this. They generally have high anxiety because they're worried about all the different things that can happen, and the cowboy type, they're less like that, or they're less worried about what can happen. And that's one reason they compete so well. But then if you take the weak part of each of the personalities. So here's my thought is if I take the good part here and I take the good part here and I mesh them together, that's what I want to be. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what I was, right? I want to be someone and I was someone earlier, like in high school, who had a lot of anxiety around competition, and really anxiety is a negative factor because you're thinking about all these things that don't actually matter, right? And so whether it's a wrestling match or on the battlefield, all that matters is what you're doing in the moment, right now. That's it. It doesn't matter what's going to happen tomorrow. It doesn't matter who's in the stands and who's watching. There's all these extraneous things that don't matter at all, and they're only a distraction, and they're only going to make things worse. Oh my God, I heard this guy's got a really good record. Like it doesn't matter. And so all that matters is what's happening right now. So if I can get my mind off all the extraneous stuff and focus my mental energy on what's happening now, I'm going to be as good as possible in the moment. And so I figure, hey, if I could take the good part over here, and I take the good part over here, and I can put them together, and we wash the bad parts out, we have a much better competitor. And so that's kind of like what the whole book is about.
Yeah, exactly. And you talk, and how do you apply that in your academy as well with the guys coming through?
Absolutely.
How do you sort of, what would your advice be to sort of a coach or a leader across different areas that are looking to try and do exactly that? Because I think the analogy is brilliant in terms of the two different mindsets that people tend to sit on somewhere on that continuum, don't they, between the cowboy but what's
and this happens. So we have I believe it's 9 chapters on individual, characteristics. We have a few chapters that lead into it, of course. And I would say, I just said this, we had an AWA All Coaches Summit. That's Askren Wrestling Academy All Coaches Summit. And I think the main hurdle to getting kids to get to like a really elite level, I think you can get good on a lower level just from strictly physical skills. If you're very strong and in shape and you have a handful of good moves, like you're going to be like kind of good at least. But to get to that really uber elite level, almost every kid I've ever dealt with has some type of or multiple mental hurdles. And now at this point, it's kind of like I feel like it's kind of easy to identify them, and it's right, because now we've been open for 13 years, so I've had 13. First I was practicing on myself, and now I've been practicing on these kids. And we, like I said, we have 8 or 9 chapters in here about specific characteristics. I identify those couple as I'm watching, right? So as I'm watching them as a little kid and growing up, by the time I really start digging deep when they're, say, 8th, 9th, 10th grade, I already kind of have an idea of what problems I'm going to need to attack with them and then how I'm going to address them. So I do think to get kids to really take the next step up to an elite level, you're going to have to clear some mental roadblocks for them. And that's kind of what the premise of the book is.
Yeah. And how do you, so say you got someone who's up the cowboy end, what's something you might do practically to nudge them a little bit along the other way or see that balance?
Yeah. Well, so I think the magic is this. The magic is, number one, they have to care enough to actually want to do it, right? If they don't care, it doesn't matter what you're going to say. They're just not going to do it because they just don't care. But it's an I told you so without doing an I told you so. And this is one thing a lot of coaches do wrong. If you do an I told you so, it creates a confrontational situation where it's you versus me, right? We're against each other. If I said, James, I told you that not buying Bitcoin was a dumb move, then you would immediately want to tell me why you were right in not buying Bitcoin. It's volatile. It's not backed by anything. And you give me all these crazy reasons, right? Because Bitcoin is the greatest. And we don't need to argue about that.
Of course.
But so we would create a confrontation, right? And with a coach and an athlete, we want them to feel as though we're moving in the same direction, because we are. Because if I, as a coach, have a bunch of athletes who are doing the right thing and being successful, then I look really good as a coach because they're out there kicking ass, right? Yeah. They kick the ass, and then I have a bunch of ass kickers, and then they're like, "Oh my gosh, this guy's
the reflection of you, right, and your leadership."
The reflection of me. So we are moving the same direction. So if I, instead saying, "I freaking told you, James," if instead I say, "Hey, James, you lost that last match, and you lost that last match because you were just being a little too stubborn. Like, remember how I tried telling you to do X, Y, and Z?
Yeah.
Think about that match. If you go back there and you would have done X, Y, and Z, you probably would have won the match." And, every kid who's kind of highly competitive, they don't want to lose. So when you say, "Hey, like, I want you to win too. Here's a way that you could have won." They're like, and so some kids, I can think of a few kids where it's like, I might have had to say it 4, 5, or 6 times before it really clicked. And then
do you think that patience is part of it?
Yeah.
That being patient is part of it, giving them the opportunity rather than just ramming it down their throat. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, the one thing you couldn't be patient on would be, I would say, if they're not willing to give effort, if they're not willing to buy in, then you got to kind of leave them alone until they are. Because otherwise that's going to be a really huge source of frustration between you and them, is that it's really hard to make them want to do it, right? So you can create up
Yeah.
scenarios where it's more likely that they're going to want to do it, but you can never make them want to do it. And so,
Yeah, it's got to come from them.
It's got to come from them. We have a lot of kids at AWA who they're all the way in and they love it, but we still have some that aren't, right? And they're all in the same environment and they all get the same treatment. But I always tell a kid, like, hey man, if you're really buying into yourself, then I'm gonna buy into you too. And I'm gonna try to do all the things that I can to help you achieve the highest levels, because I'm watching you buy into yourself first.
Sorry to interrupt, but before we dive deeper into the conversation, I want to express how grateful I am that you're choosing to spend your time here. I also want to take a moment to ask for your support. I want to bring you the best podcast I can. And by hitting that like button, subscribing to the podcast, or a one-click review, you play a vital role. When you hit that like button, leave a rating or subscribe, you enable the podcast to reach a much wider audience. And the wider our audience, the easier it is for guests within my network to convince their agents and management teams to free up their diary and come on our show. Thank you in advance for your likes, reviews, and subscriptions. Now let's get you back to leveling up.
Okay, you almost match the intensity of your coaching to the intensity of their internal motivation.
Yeah, because if they're really willing to make those commitments, then I, as a coach, should be able to then help them clear the roadblocks in front of them to their success. If they're willing to make that commitment, and luckily we have a lot of them who are.
Yeah.
But if they're just not willing to work, there's not much you can do for them. Right. There's not much I can do.
What about at the elite level though? Because there's I guess there's academy coaching, but then there comes there's those tier one guys that are competing at the highest level. Is there, what's your principles for, when's it time to cut people?
Cut?
To cut people from your program, or
so we don't do any cutting, but like you said, in America, with the college system.
But if it was a college system, or if it was an Olympic thing, like you said, you can only take 7 guys. You got 15 in camp.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so that's a little tougher. So I'll just tell you with us, we don't cut anyone. Because what I have found is there are kids where like they're just not putting the effort and you leave them alone, and then all of a sudden something clicks, they get more mature, right? And all of a sudden they start working, and you're like, holy shit. Like little Billy
they go and do a Spartan with Joe, or something happens in their life, and suddenly
boom, and they take off, right? And then it's like, okay,
keep them in the game.
Keep them in the game. As far as a college program, then yes, obviously, if you only have, say, 35 spots or something, you're going to want to really make sure, hey, here's the standards that need to be met. And by that point, you're an adult. So either you meet the standards or you don't. If you don't, then I'm sorry, find a different program to be at.
And how was that in the US Olympic system? Because, I think in the UK, we perceive wrestling's just not as big in the UK as
it's not, unfortunately.
No, it's a shame, really. But the perception outside in is that it's one of those disciplined crafts, where people are up early, training hard, putting in reps. I think people's perceptions of wrestlers are that they have those traits.
Yes.
How hard is that, or how accurate is that? We see the movie.
It's very accurate. Very accurate. Yeah, but I would say on the college, as far as making an Olympic team, it's simply a tournament. And if you win, you're on the team, and if you don't, so there's no it's almost like it is a team.
So you're selected based on winning rather than
it's not really a team.
Okay,
that would be the only fair way to do it, right? If you have everyone in America, there's no way you're going to put them on the same team. So So it's just strictly based on how you do at the Olympic trials. They have a tryout, and if you make the team, you make the team.
Got you. Purely on outcomes.
Yeah, I don't think there's ever been anyone who won the Olympic trials and then been kicked off the
team for turning up late or not going.
Never.
You win, you're in.
I want to say maybe one guy. I'm trying to think. Maybe failed the drug test potentially, which obviously would take you off the team because you'd be ineligible. Yeah.
Okay, because occasionally you get those guys that win, but they're real loose and they're out on the piss for a few days.
Yeah, that's pretty rare in wrestling. It's pretty rare.
Okay, cool,
Yeah, just because, that's kind of one of the reasons that I think wrestlers have so much success in mixed martial arts is because if you've made it past college wrestling, you've likely been in some type of system for, say, 8 to 10 years where you're expected to show up on time and you're expected to work hard and you're not really cutting slack if you don't. So, you already
Those
have that kind
fundamentals
of,
are there.
yeah,
Yeah.
you have most of that background. And then when you show up to the MMA gym, you're just ready to rumble.
Yeah. One of the things I loved about the book was the conversation around, being prepared for the for the
Yeah.
randomness that can come your way. And I often talk about how, you got to train under extreme conditions because elite performance is full of potential minefields and you can never predict
Yes.
when they might strike from a, I've seen coaches break it down before international tournaments. You don't get the warm up or, in
Yep.
football or rugby. And how important is that to you in terms of the way you shape your athletes or the way you shape your preparation throughout your
Yeah.
career?
Well, I honestly, I think it's just a mindset
Yeah.
of, so it's prepare for everything and expect the unexpected. And, Joe tried going off on, I'm going to be super prepared, blah, 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 blah. He's going
Yeah.
nuts. When we met in person. And I'm like, hey, Joe, did you predict coronavirus? Because you're an events company.
Yeah.
He's like,
Oh, yeah. We
shit.
talked all about what that did to Spartan.
Yeah,
Yeah.
didn't predict that one. So
No.
there's always going to be the unexpected happen, and whether it's you can't warm up right, or whether you get thrown on your back and you give up a bunch of points right away, or
Yeah.
something to this effect. And so it's just you just need to, in my opinion, mentally make the acknowledgement. And if you are in the mindset of I can predict every single thing that's going to happen, and something happens which is unpredicted, it's going to mess with you mentally. You're going to say, oh my gosh. And we've
Mm.
all seen competitors like this where something bad happens and they fall apart.
Yeah.
That's not who you want to be. You don't want to be that guy. And if you just come into the competition with the mindset, I am prepared, but some things might not go my way, right? Something bad might happen. And if something bad happens, I'm going to be able to react to it. And that's not an issue. If you just have that mindset, it's not really a big deal.
Yeah.
But if you have the mindset of, oh, I'm ready I'm ready, I can predict everything, and if something bad happens, you're not ready for it. And so I think it's just one of those things. And a lot of times in business books, they talk about how lots of times the smaller companies are the ones that are a little more nimble and ready to react because a lot of times the bigger ones, you think of Blockbuster, Netflix, right? The bigger ones think, no, I can control everything.
Yeah.
But even when you're that big, you still can't, right?
There's
And you
just
still
too
have
many
to be ready.
variables. Too many
Too many
variables.
variables, and you got to be ready.
Yeah.
And if you're not, it doesn't matter how big and how dominant you are. If you're not ready for some of the things that can be unpredictable, then it's going to really negatively affect you. And, in sports, that's losing a match. And in business, it could be going bankrupt.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that adaptability, that be able to makes you a horrible competitor. If you can
Yes.
be
If you can't
adaptable and flow with
adapt,
that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. If you can't
You're very
adapt, you're
easy to
only
disrupt
going to
a battle.
win. Yeah. You're only going to win the ones that go your way. And
Yeah.
if there's anything that doesn't go your way, then you're not going to win because you don't have the ability to adapt.
And nothing's going to go your way for that long, unfortunately.
Nothing's going to go your way every time. Yes.
Not the way life
Yeah.
works. And then
Uh,
I guess one of the other things I'd love to ask you is, in terms of you strike me as this sort of model professional in terms of you fall in love with this craft, you put the effort in, you're being proactive, and I love those behaviors for people listening in terms of you, like the way you talked earlier about, I told my parents I want to go and watch those trials, and then that lit
mhm.
maybe sparked the flames, and yeah, you then start
Yeah.
reading all these books that informed a lot of the lessons in the books. But are there any in there that you learned the hard way by just completely getting it wrong or going into things out of
Um,
balance? Have you ever gone into fights too hyped up or the opposite, too chilled out because you've won four in the bout?
yeah.
Because that's something I'm always
Yeah.
looking at with people I work with. Don't want them to, like, winning can be dangerous. Sometimes winning too much, it can make people comfortable,
Yeah.
complacent, and then again you lose that balance, that balance bit again.
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest one would be, and I talk about this in the book, but I mentioned this in high school. I went into is Fargo is our big national tournament 'cause it's hosted in the same place every year. And I
Yeah.
really shit the bed. And this was when I was 14 or 15 or something like that. And it was all because I had just a high amount of anxiety about all the different things. It was like, oh, this is my first really big national tournament. Oh, there's college coaches. Oh, look at all these guys with these credentials. All this, like I said, all this bullshit that doesn't matter.
Mm.
And that was a really hard lesson. And luckily I learned it early, when I was 14 or 15, not when I was 25. So that was a really big one, a really big wake up call
I think
for
that is
me.
such an important thing you've just said there to anyone listening, because it can often be when you have those moments early on in your career. I've seen so many people internalize that. I felt like this at that big event, therefore maybe I don't have what it takes. When it's actually the
Yeah.
opposite. It's like this is where you want to learn that. You don't want to be learning that lesson. The earlier, the better. And it's about
Yes.
extracting profit from is perhaps perceived as a negative event, and I
Yes.
can set you up for saving. Well, it can save you a hell of a lot of pain in the future.
Yeah, you want to learn as early as possible, ideally. Um, you know, I always say about competition to my athletes, if you can take the emotional part out of it, the more you can compete, the better. And so, if you can compete and you can get unemotional and just say, okay, here's what happened, good or bad. Here's what I learned for it. I'm going to take the lessons away from it, and I'm going to get better from there. Then
Do you think
every competition is beneficial to you because every competition you learn something about yourself, which is
100%?
ideally going to make you more prepared for the next one.
And do you think in MMA wrestling, but I work quite a bit in boxing, and I don't know. I feel that sometimes the guys don't compete enough because sparring behind closed doors just isn't
Yes,
the same as
not the same.
it's not the same. And I feel like some of these guys fight, almost max twice a year. And I
Yes.
just feel like, over a career, if you could make that three or four, the profit and the learning would just maximize that development curve. I mean, what's your thoughts on that side of it?
Yep, I agree fully and totally. Um, boxing, no, so no, boxing, I guess maybe I would disagree because generally those guys have a crap ton of not exhibition, amateur bouts.
Yeah.
Right? They usually have a really, really high amount of amateur bouts. Um, but in MMA, that's totally true. And that's another reason, right? We talk about reasons why wrestlers do well. But wrestlers have all of these competitions. By the time they get to mixed martial arts, they might have wrestled 1,000 times,
Yeah.
right? Like a lot. And so I always say wrestling is a skill, but competition is a skill also. Understanding how to compete to the maximum of your potential is absolutely a skill that you can work on. And you will actually see that. And then I put myself on the spot to think of an example. But there have been, I can't think of one off the top of my head. I just thought is a mixed martial artist who, at the beginning of his career has tremendous skills, but is not a great competitor. And so we'll kind of maybe have this really wide range of results, and then
Yeah.
they kind of figure out how to compete and how to get their best out of themselves. And so then as they get older, they start becoming significantly more consistent. And instead of having a good result and a bad result and a good result and a bad result, all
That
of a sudden they start
volatility
putting
reduces. Yeah.
way more in the positive column than the negative column.
Yeah. Absolutely. And in terms of, what you've obviously had some incredible successes as well, but you've also you've had some challenges as well, right? Professionally, in terms of
Yeah.
tougher fights than others and losses. You can't avoid it. Anyone performing at the top is going to
Yes.
have losses. What mindset do you bring into that in those moments?
Like I said, if you can be unemotional about competition, it's just what do you learn from every single time? And I think that's an important one to note is, what did I learn from this performance and what can I take away from it and what can I move to the next one? Um, and so I think
Just
I
trying to
didn't lose
identify.
a lot. Yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't lose a lot in mixed martial arts, and unfortunately, the ones that I did lose were way at the end of my career, and so it wasn't like, oh, I can take these lessons and apply them moving forward in mixed martial arts because I don't have any more mixed martial arts to do.
Got you.
I would say, luckily, I think a lot of the lessons that I need to learn, um, happened way, way, way earlier in my life because I wasn't great as a wrestler, and so I had so many losses that I got to learn from.
So is it fair to say your advice to people in whatever it is they're aiming to get better at is to chuck themselves in the deep end and compete, get on stage, bake the cake, take the fight, get involved?
Yes, that's exactly what I would say is if you want to get better at, and this is better at anything, and so obviously in sport we have competition. It's a very finite thing, but if you want to be an entrepreneur and start a business,
Yeah.
go do it. right? Like I took no business colleges and classes in college. I didn't want to do business. I thought I was gonna be a college wrestling coach, and then I started fighting. And then my brother wanted to start these wrestling academies, and so then we had to learn the hard way. But you learn the hard way by throwing yourself in the fire, and you see what works and you see what doesn't work, and then you try to get rid of what doesn't work, and you try to keep what does work, and then you just keep iterating on that. And the more chances you take, the faster you figure it out. And so, I think that's not just a competition skill, but that's a life skill. If you want to be good at anything, right,
It
go
creates that
do it.
need as well, right? Because
Yeah.
when you're reading your book, when you're
Yes.
reading your books, but you're just sparring behind closed doors, you're just in the gym.
Yes.
It's a very different in terms of what you extract from each page is very different when you're like, shit, I've got this fight
Yes.
away, and you want to extract more information. I feel like
Yes. There's this really great quote. Oh man. Okay, I got it for you. I do these book readings with my kids, with the kids I coach.
Nice.
Well, in the beginning I was an idiot because first of all, I'd had different groups reading different books, so I would have to read all the books. And then, you can't memorize everything in there, so I'd have to always go reread them. So then I started making Google Docs of all the important notes for every chapter,
Nice.
and then I make them read the same books. So now, like, I have my list, so I don't have to go redo them every single time. But I don't have you read Chop Wood, Carry Water?
I haven't, no.
Oh my gosh, such a great book. I mean, it's probably I mean, let's see. I'd say it's great advice for anyone, but it's really kind of maybe a lower reading level, really great for like middle school, high school kids, I would say. An adult, you're gonna be able to finish it in a couple hours. But so like literally so many great lessons. And this one reminds me of something you just said, and it's the two words is Gnisco, the knowledge of something, and Yada, the experience of something. And the quote is, it is one thing to read about war, it's another to live a warrior's life. And it's like
That is brilliant.
that's
Yeah.
I tell these kids, like, you got to get in the fire. Like, you can't just think about it, you can't just read about it, you got to go do it. Like that's it. You gotta live the warrior's life if you want to be a warrior.
Damn right.
Yeah.
And back to the book though. What prompted you to write it? Did you always feel like you had a book in you, or
Well, so I
was it?
actually wrote my initial book just about my life during coronavirus because these
Yeah,
assholes locked us in our houses for a
that was
few
brutal.
months.
It's infuriating.
So brutal.
Back on it.
So dumb.
Yeah,
Um,
congratulations on getting your country back, by the way.
let's go.
Yeah.
It's so awesome. Maybe we could bring UK along next or something. Who knows?
Oh, I pray to God. I pray to God. Yeah.
Don't say anything too crazy because they'd be throwing people in jail just for talking these days.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Um,
there's a, yeah.
I'll say all the crazy things.
Yeah. Yeah. Where's
Um,
Ben?
so bad. So I wrote a first book I just kind of contacted this guy I really liked, and I said, "Hey, I'm stuck in my house, and I bet you are too. You want to write a book?" And he said, "Sure." So we did it. But with this extreme balance, like I said, I had started forming these ideas kind of during college and making notes of things, and um, probably sometime shortly after college, I had this kind of like full list of different characteristics which people needed balance on, where they generally lean one way or they generally lean the other way. And so it kind of just had been in my head. And then, like I said, then coaching at Askren Wrestling Academy, I had seen in action it take place over and over and over again. And I realized if I could just get these kids to be more balanced and not so far on one side, that it's going to have a really profound effect. And I was able to do it. And then, so actually, I was on a podcast with Joe, actually, probably during Corona sometime. And I said, I started talking about this idea. And he got off the podcast and he's like, "Hey, like, are you serious about writing a book? Do you really want to do it?" And I said, "Yeah, I've been trying to find someone to help me write this book because I'm not a particularly good writer." And he said, "Okay, cool, let's do it." And he's like, "Let me put a team together." And so we put a
That's
team
what I love
together
about
and
Joe. He just gets stuff,
yeah, it was
doesn't he?
awesome.
It's brilliant.
So yeah, so he connected me with David Sachs, who's a PhD in sports psychology, and he was, really brilliant. And yeah, we put a team together, and we were able to write the book, and it turned out really awesome.
If you could drill one message into people listening to this, people who want more out of themselves, they know they've got more in their locker, but maybe they're not quite sure where to start. What would your advice be to them?
Oh, that's a good one. Well, I would say first of all, yeah, I think the easiest thing would be identify what it is that you want, right? And
Yeah.
don't be scared. Shoot for the stars. Like, don't be a little bitch. Like, put something big out there. Like, try to be great. I'm gonna have to use a quote from I have to use another quote from Stop Wood Carry Water. I got a really good
I'll
one
have to
here.
read this one.
So you got to read the book. Yeah, it's a really easy read, and it's so many great lessons in there. But so put something out there, and then start taking the action on an every single day basis to do it. And if you're going to do something really special, it's not going to happen in a week, and it's not going to happen in a month. It's likely going to happen over the course of many, many, many years. And so the quote is, it's from chapter 5, and they tell a story along with it. And so the story is about the guy who started IKEA, and he, as a kid, started selling. How he started was he would sell matches, like individual matchsticks, door to door, and that was kind of how his business started. And so then, they talk about that, but then the quote is, everyone wants to have the next Apple or Facebook, but no one wants to sell matches. Everyone wants to be a samurai warrior, but few are willing to faithfully chop wood, carry water. And we have these boards, the All-American boards, on our walls at the academy. And I tell kids, I said, hey, how many of you guys don't want to be up on the board? No one ever raises their hand. Everyone wants to be up on the damn board, right? Everybody. Everyone wants to do something special. But I said, how many of you guys are actually willing to faithfully chop wood, carry water every single day? Because this isn't going to take a week. It's not going to take a month. It's going to take probably many years. And I'm here. I will be here. I would love to have you guys go on that journey. And right, I leave it at that, because it's going to be on them to wake up every day and chop wood, carry water.
Amazing. And what do you think? One of the things I've noticed in the UK over the last few years is the rise of jiu-jitsu. I mean, it seems like it's incredibly addictive, and it feels like guys are getting real stuck into it. What do you think it is? How do you explain what martial arts can do for people that perhaps haven't tried it out, but maybe do need something to force them into that adaptive zone? One option is to go run a Spartan with Joe, right? And it forces you into these scenarios where you have to look at yourself, and it's painful, it hurts, and you got to finish it. Martial arts is probably another similar option.
Yeah, so I would say there's this book I read. I'm blanking on what the name is right now. Anyways, I'm like, holy shit. It was about men specifically. And it was I looked up the author after. It was like, oh, he's all right, terrible guy. I'm like, oh, okay, all right. So I'm blanking on his name also. But anyways, the whole premise was men need battle. Men need to battle. And you know what? I reflected on that, and I'm like, I kind of didn't really disagree with much that he said. Maybe there's a few parts where I disagreed a little bit, but generally speaking, no. And it's like, well, I've been kind of battling my whole life. That's kind of what I did, and I feel very fulfilled. And I brought up to my wife, and she's one of the things we always talk about, how firefighters, men who, what do you guys call them? Firefighters are in the UK also.
Yeah, firemen, yeah.
Okay, firemen. But everyone I've ever met has seemed very fulfilled and very happy with what they do. But other men, there's so many other men who feel unfulfilled with what they do. They enjoy what they do on a daily basis. And it's like firemen they're literally putting themselves at risk on a generally everyday basis, right? They're going into some type of battle. It's with the fire, not another human. Yeah. But they're doing something risky. They're doing something that's challenging. They're putting themselves in the battle. And I really genuinely think men need that on some way, shape, or form. And so, like a Spartan race, that would be a battle with yourself, probably, maybe the obstacles, but right, it's a battle. And jiu-jitsu is the same thing. It's a battle with another human being. And so, like, I really genuinely think that men need that, and it is missing in the lives of a lot of men. So yeah, I think it's important. I think once men once they do it, they get it. It's inherent. They maybe can't even explain why they love it so much, but there's something that
there was a hole that was there.
It fills a hole that would, yes, that's a great way to put it. Yes.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you there. I do have to ask you. You've scrapped with some top fighters over the years, and you've trained with them. And I'm sure your peers and friendships with some top fighters. But if you could pick one performer you've worked with, competed with, trained with, got to know to fight for your life, who would that be?
Oh man, that's a tough question. Oh. Well, if it's my life, I want to do it.
Yeah.
So if it's my life on the line, I don't want to put that in anyone else's hands. I want to go do it myself. So that way I can bear the responsibility for the result. And I would I would rather not like to put the responsibility of my own life in anyone else's hands.
No,
So
I love that
I would
answer.
love to go do that for myself.
Yeah, I love that. But all right then, well, we're going to reframe the question then. Who's one of the most elite professionals you've worked with in terms of, I think the ultimate
Yeah.
compliment in the world I've worked in is, you know, if you describe someone, if you know, he's a professional. That's like the
Yeah.
ultimate compliment. Like, is there someone for you who stands out, who sort of had it all in terms of mentality, professionalism,
Um,
maybe some character as well?
you know what? I mean, I would say I feel lucky to have been around a lot of these people. Like, and this is like I said, I'm lucky. It's like it's not rare, you know. Like, there's been many national champions that I trained with when I was at college. After that, you know, in the fighting world, there was plenty of world champions that I was like, it was very regular basis where I was around a world champion in mixed martial arts or jujitsu or yeah, right on some elite level. And then, you know, since I retired, it's like now we've had what, four guys who have won either an NCAA Division I title or a world title. Um, and so
Fantastic.
like there's a lot of these type of people who I've been lucky enough to be around, and of course I'm observing them and their personality type, and
Yeah,
you know, making mental notes on why they, you know, why they take that way. So almost too many to name. You know, Tyron Woodley, Anthony Pettis were two very elite mixed martial artists.
yeah,
At University of Missouri, my brother won a national title, and Mark Ellis won a national title. Anthony Robles won a national title while I was at Arizona State coaching there. You know, and now our probably three highest profile athletes who are in college now are Mitchell Messenbrink, Keegan O'Toole, and Parker Keckeisen, all who have won either national or world titles. So yeah, it's
amazing.
been really awesome.
And how did you find that transition out of the sport? Obviously, you had your business
I
going.
was ready. I was
You were
ready.
ready.
So it
Okay,
was rolling.
perfect.
I was ready to go. And you
Yeah,
know what? When I retired the first time in 2017, I went all into coaching. And then, you know, when I got my opportunity, I did unretire and I put it back on the back burner for a little bit. And then I retired again and I, you know, moved forward with it again.
incredible. Can I
Yeah.
finish off with some quick fire questions?
Yeah.
Perfect. Favorite movie?
Without Limits, which is about Steve Prefontaine's life.
Okay. Favorite book? I think we know the answer to this one.
Extreme Balance. Let's
Yeah.
go. No, it's the other favorites though. I love Chop Wood, Carry Water. It's great
Yeah,
for athletes. I love the book Mindset by Carol Dweck. I think it's foundational to any sport psychology. Talent Code. A lot of our academy system principles are founded around talent code. Rise of Superman is a book that's about elite sports performance. And I think it does a good job. Bitcoin Standard. It'll help you understand why Bitcoin is the greatest money. It's going to help all kinds of human beings. 48 Laws of Power. I think that describes pretty accurately the relationships between different power dynamics in people. Oh man, what else do I got over there? That was a pretty
that's a
good
good
list
list.
of
That's a good list. That'll
solid
do.
ones. Yeah.
Greatest athlete of all time.
Oh, greatest athlete of all time. I feel like this is almost an impossible one to answer because of, you know, what metric are you scoring them
What's
under?
your metric?
I mean, I'm biased. I'll probably say Muhammad Ali, which I don't know if
Yeah,
that's the right
that's
answer,
fine.
but without thinking about it too much, he was really great.
And is there a greatest team of all time for you? Team sport?
I don't think much about team sports.
Nah.
I really
Ben
only
Askren
watch
doesn't
wrestling
do
and
team
fighting, and
sports.
that's
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Fair enough. Ben, thank you so much for taking the time. The book's fantastic. We'll whack up the links and yeah, have a
Thanks a
brilliant
lot,
weekend.
James.
And yeah, don't worry, we'll sort things out in the UK.
I appreciate it. Have a great day.
Cheers.
Whilst I hope you've enjoyed our conversation, the magic happens when you put the principles to work by aligning yourself with them. People who listen to podcasts like this tend to fall into one of two categories. The first experience is a high that fades, and before they know it, it's back to business as usual. Nothing changes. The second group, your group, also feel the high, but they sustain it and go on to achieve significant change. What distinguishes the two? Putting these lessons or principles to work immediately. This is potentially game-changing information. I've seen it, but it can't change anything if you don't act on it. Remember, this is not just for accelerating excellence, but also for maximizing your quality of life. There is always a way to optimize. And the secret to becoming everything you can be is to just start. So, if something resonated with you in this conversation, act on it. Excellence is just a series of days repeated over and over again. So go on the attack and win your day. Chances are you know someone that needs to listen to this conversation. Please make sure to share a link with them and keep me updated with how you get on. Make sure you slam any questions in the comments or reach out directly. I've got you covered. In 2021, I published my first book, Accelerating Excellence. If you're finding the conversations and information on this podcast useful, you're going to find the book useful. The book is more of an operation manual. It's a step-by-step guide on how to implement all this stuff so you can get maximum benefit. It's a #1 bestseller filled with highly actionable strategies you can apply today to become better tomorrow. Head to jamesaking.com to download 6 chapters free in audio or digital format. The full book's available on Amazon, Audible, or at your local bookstore. All links are in the show notes. The game has changed. The players have changed. The hard truth is it has become harder to identify elite performers to drive your organization forward and ignite a winning mentality within today's workforce. Without the right talent, without the right mentality, and without the right performance systems to deliver these, outlier performance will remain your goal, not your reality. At A6 Partners, we solve this problem every day in the most demanding arenas. The talent, the mentality, it's there. It is possible. Our performance systems are not designed to tick boxes, tolerate bias, or ensure comfort. They are designed to ensure performance where performance is all that matters. We embed elite performance systems to attract and select the right people and develop and motivate those people. From short, sharp, sledgehammer, intensive change programs, right through to long-term sustained partnership. We work with our partners to transition your organization into a magnet for elite talent and embed a systematic process for selecting winners. We build world-class development programs to transform raw talent into sustained high performance. We instill winning cultures that set and live by their own demanding standards, resulting in a team of autonomous, high-performing, and resilient problem solvers who deliver. Our team of consultants is comprised of the outlier individuals I've worked with firsthand over decades. This includes PhD performance scientists, senior British and American Special Forces operators, Olympic gold medal winning coaches, world-leading psychologists, and C-level leaders from trading and investing. For us, second place is not an option. If you're sick to death of mediocrity and truly want your team to excel, then click the link in show notes and get in touch now. When was the last time you launched yourself out your comfort zone? Here's your chance to do exactly that. On May the 17th, we're entering an Accelerating Excellence team at the London Spartan Trifecta weekend. I want you on that team. It's free, but spots are limited, so you're going to need to act fast. This is all powered by my pal, Joe De Sena, the founder of Spartan, multiple New York Times best-selling author, and the ultimate advocate for doing hard things. You'll be racing alongside myself, guests from this podcast, and some of my peer group from trading, investing, elite military, and sport. We don't care what your current state of fitness or life is. In fact, the lower the better. The thing I love most about events like Spartan is that they provide us with an opportunity to voluntarily confront challenge, physically and mentally. This means you don't have to wait for life to inevitably slam one your way before you decide to level up. It's an opportunity to carve out your own mind and emerge stronger from challenge than you went in. On race day, I'll be hosting an exclusive Q&A session where we'll discuss everything elite performance. Spots are limited and they're going fast. Don't overthink it. Click the link in the show notes now and sign up as an individual with a friend, partner, your team, or company. By doing so, you instantly become part of an ambitious, like-minded team of people who set high standards and attack challenges head on. Get it done now, and I'll see you on the 17th of May.